What up, Facebook Live family and friends? Elliot Andre, the Hatted Therapist, is here from Connected Roots. Today I have a super sick interview with a person I'm just meeting virtually named Robert Trout. Robert, if you could, give our friends and family out there a thumbs up, tell them you're here, and give an introduction and what sets you apart from the field in the therapy world.
All right. Well, thank you. My name is Robert Trout. I'm the founder of a company called the Experiential Healing Institute. And what sets us apart or makes us unique is that we are a group, there's 5 of us currently, that used to work in wilderness therapy programs, residential programs. We've started programs. We spent years training staff in programs. And now we stepped into this new venture over the last almost 3.5 years now, where we take all of that information and all of the skills that we would spend hours and hours and hours a year, hundreds of hours a year, training staff in, and we now bring all of that information to families where they live. So what we do is we fly worldwide, wherever the families are, and we go in and we don't answer their questions necessarily. Our focus is based on a skill set of, okay, what is your son, daughter, youth, young adult, what are they struggling with? And then what patterns have developed with that as you as the parent? You know, you might be a bulldozer parent, you might be a hovering parent, you might be a rescuer, you might be all of these different things that parents step into most of the time unknowingly to try to problem solve or to save their kid. And ultimately, what we get into is that if you're just guessing at what you should do, then you're oftentimes making it worse. And sometimes you're actually driving the issue. You're the one that's making it happen over and over and over again. And our work is to train parents, family members, sometimes grandparents, aunts, uncles, whoever it is. Our job is to teach you to be the staff that would be in all of these programs that exist, so that you are equipped with the exact skill sets to support the mental health needs, emotional behavioral health needs of your kids specifically, so that they can be at home, so that they can either not go to treatment because you turned it around and stabilized the household, or they're coming back from wilderness or coming back from residential treatment or intensive IOP program or something where the parents are, whether you like it or not, your parents. So guess what? They're always your kid. You're going to be the one with them in 20 years when they relapse or have a behavioral issue that comes up in their marriage or whatever it might be. And how nice would it be for you to know, here are 5 different ways I can handle that event when it happens, when I need it, or right now, because guess what? Things aren't stable right now. Totally. So we are the parent training company that we teach families to be the professionals, not the therapists, not the therapist. And that's the key to this, is some parents want to be their kid's therapist or their best friend. And again, all those patterns are going to break down and often cause more harm than good. So we're focused on a level below all of that, where how can you hold and be the staff that would facilitate a process and a program for this individual so they can actually succeed, actually get better. And if everything goes well, you can live with them and have some peace in your house.
Freedom!
How amazing would that be? Yeah, like, and just to have that, just to know that that is success for most of our families.
That's amazing. I think one thing that you hit on and that's so prominent in this world right now is this idea of this bulldozer parent. And I've read a couple books and spoken with a bunch of clients about this and how much their parents affect them. And if you could give us, an example or to our parents watching out there, like thumbs up if this is something you need help with, honestly, because the self-awareness that I feel like some of our parents do not have is where Robert comes in and where his company comes in, because he's really providing that space for them to really come to a conclusion that the parent needs as much training as they feel as if their kid does.
That's right.
So that being said, can we talk about boundaries? Because I feel like what I'm catching a lot from this conversation so far is that boundaries are being crossed in many ways by a lot of parents. So is there any way in the program that you feel like you could give a tangible skill or tool right now in this moment to our viewers out there in a sense of how you work with setting boundaries?
Absolutely. The first thing that I need to specify for that answer, though, and just one of our mottos is options, not answers,
Totally.
because we can't say here's the golden nugget that's going to
For
solve
sure.
all these problems. That doesn't exist.
Absolutely. Totally. I agree.
We want to be upfront with everyone.
Mm-hmm.
When you read the parenting book, this is how you do it. Guess
Right.
what? It doesn't work.
Doesn't work for everyone. Totally.
That's right. And that's why for our work, it's okay, let's look at your family,
Totally.
your situation, your mental health, your kids' mental health. Let's look
100%.
at all of the factors in that. But when you get into boundaries, I can give some examples. For example, working with a family that the kids are actually 6, 7, 8 years old, in that range, which is some of the youngest we get into.
Yes.
In our work, the families are looking at it, and there's this dynamic around boundaries where, whether the parent's aware of it or not, at that age range, most professionals are going to agree that at that age, kids are developing what we would consider their first taste of who I am. I know that's a big philosophical question, but at that age, the way that you mostly see it manifest is that they go, for example, to school, and they see their friend fight their parent about getting to have a cupcake.
Okay.
Right?
Yep.
And so many of the parents that we use an example like this will say, oh, we saw that. And guess what? Within 3 days, and 3 is a magic number, but within 3 days,
love it,
their kid fights the exact same battle with them.
Wow.
And tries to see, does that work for me? Will my mom give me this cupcake because I said this the way my friend did? And it's not mimicry necessarily. It's not, oh, they did it. It's, I wonder if that's me. So when we look at 6, 7, 8 years old, there's this like, is that me? And they're going to go try it. And sometimes they will hyper focus and latch onto that. So when we talk about boundaries in that age range, for example, we would look at setting those boundaries around, oh, I see that this is one of those moments that you want to know where my boundary is.
Got it.
That your kid is not trying to be mean to you or trying to control you in those moments. A lot of parents might get really frustrated or really angry in that moment. And what we try to do is get the parent to understand that their reaction is actually the problem in that moment, because their kid's just trying what they're supposed to try. Their brain is developing this process of trial and error and eliminating the things that don't work in their family system, their society, which is usually first, second grade. All these different things. They're doing elimination. Does this work? Does this work? Does this work? No, yes. They're logging that. But the parent's job is to recognize, oh, I reacted in this way, and that's going to drive future behaviors for years to come. Because, for example, with a lot of parents, they'll go and be like, I'm really sorry I got mad at you. One of my personal and professional things is apologies are devastating for kids if you're not paying attention to the context of it. Totally. So a parent that goes and says, you had this moment where you asked for this cupcake and I gave the answer. When I gave the answer, that to me is where it stopped. Okay. When I said no, I have an expectation that you'll listen to me as your mother or father, and this is where it's going to stop. However, when that kid pushes and pushes and pushing, especially if it's something new, that parent, we use a term called backtracking. That parent backtracks and goes to a different event in their history where the brain has a reprogram, maybe from when they were a child and their parents said no, and what that looked like, and they play out what they think is a survival scenario or a reactionary scenario. So when it comes to boundaries, it's about setting the boundary, having the answer, but then watching the process. Are you educating the child as to why you're saying no? Not explaining. Explaining's different. And again, this is why we have a whole training series we do with this, because it's hard to even explain it in 10 minutes right now. It's more, here's the boundary. Now we have to look at reactions, both mine and yours. Okay. And if I give in and give you the cupcake because you just asked 50,000 times, I have effectively given you permission to do that again and again and again. If
Right.
that cupcake or bike or car or whatever it is that
Anything.
you
Yeah, of
want,
course. Yeah.
it's now there versus we use a lot of strategies with parents around, okay, you want a cupcake. I hear you want a cupcake. And I said, no, I see you're upset. Let's talk about you being upset.
Right. About the
Okay.
emotion rather
So
than the reaction. Yeah.
that's right. Right.
Hmm.
So again, we separate. The boundary is still no,
Right.
right?
Hmm.
And then it becomes this is the emotion. And through the conversation that we teach parents how to do that at whatever age it is, right? When you have that conversation, you get to a point that maybe you do turn around and say, okay, well, how would you work for a cupcake?
Yeah.
I'm not going to give you one. That's the
Right.
boundary.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
won't give it to you.
Hmm.
But how would you work for one? And you can see, even 6, 7, 8 year olds, they'll stop and they'll look at you like, how would I work for a cupcake?
Wow.
I can't,
That's
I,
a moment, man.
yep, I can't tell you the difference
Oh, for
in
sure.
development and brain and process for that kid that's
Yeah,
having that life experience.
totally.
Okay, I can't tell you the
I mean,
difference.
that's an unreal. I just the way you described it, I think so many of our people watching right now can take that tangible just saying of how you just said, "Will you work for something?" And I guarantee and apply it to how they talk to their kids today.
Absolutely. It doesn't matter how old they are either. That's a skill set
Right.
that we actually drill with our parents. We'll go
Totally.
over and over and over it again, getting the parent to think differently outside of the reaction.
Right.
So when we do our trainings, we're in their homes with
Hmm.
them, going through all the scenarios where their trigger patterns as parents are playing
Right.
into the patterns of the family dynamics. So when you have a kid with an anxiety disorder,
Hmm.
oftentimes what we find is that the home process, how they problem solve, is designed to continue the anxiety disorder.
Sure.
Not on
Yeah.
purpose, but
Makes
just
sense.
because maybe it gets the kid to stop having the panic attack. So they
Right.
just keep doing it, but it's perpetuating. It's not solving anything. So,
Right.
when you and I were talking about a tagline of when therapy is not the answer,
Totally.
that's really one of our things where we're not looking to say, how does it make you feel? We're looking to say,
Right.
here's 5 or 10 or 15 ways that as a professional in a boarding school, I would meet this kid at this moment and how I'd lead them from here at the conflict with
Hmm.
either the depression or the anxiety or whatever it might be. How would I lead them from this to, how would I work for a cupcake? And
Right.
when their brain makes that switch,
Hmm.
you can see the moment where the anxiety is irrelevant now. They're
Totally.
problem solving, they're
Hmm.
growing, they're
Right.
developing a new way of existing in the world. And
Fair.
to us, we want parents to do that at home. There's no reason it
Absolutely.
can't happen
I
at
agree.
home.
I agree completely. I think that's something that for a lot of parents and a lot of viewers out there, it might be hard to do. Yet I think
Sure.
honestly, I mean, it
Practice.
takes it takes time, it takes progress, it takes energy, it takes all the above to really look at ourselves in the mirror as parents. I'm not a parent, so I can't empathize 100% with this, but I'm an uncle and I've been around this enough to the point to see just with listening to you and even thinking about how I might do that with my nephew now could totally make a complete difference.
Absolutely.
100%. And I want to ask you something because in my practice and in my previous experience in the therapeutic world, I've worked with a lot of people who have, cognitive disabilities or delays and things like that. And sometimes that thinking process can be a little difficult. So I'm wondering, and I don't know if you have any experience or have any knowledge about this, but how do you think that approach may work with somebody who does have some disabilities in that regard?
Right. So in our work, when we find the kids and the parents, like I said, we look at the parents' mental health histories, their reactions. We look at the kids and what's happening for
Hmm.
them. And yes, oftentimes you will find a kid, let's say 7 years and up, where the professionals, the therapists, they have identified, and we have the testing and the psych testing or the
Right.
brain scan show that we have a deficit or a delayed
Hmm.
process of growth in a certain area. Something is
Right.
happening,
Hmm.
and that's really all as professionals we're looking for. Something is happening, and
Hmm.
especially through the teenage years, we often can't be definitive. We
Totally.
can say they have anxiety, sure,
Right.
In 3 years, however, that anxiety may manifest as maybe they had a personality disorder
Sure.
that was building and the process was happening, but we
Right.
can't see that. Not at that
Totally.
age. We
Totally.
just
I agree.
can't. So let's
Right.
just be honest about it. We can't see that.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're talking about delays and processes and things that kids are struggling with, I'll use an example of high functioning autism.
Sure.
Okay,
Absolutely. That's where I was going. Yeah.
we're seeing a ton of these kids right now.
I
We're
don't doubt
working
it.
with hundreds of those families across the country.
Mm-hmm.
And what's cool about high functioning autism is that they develop systems for survival.
Absolutely.
And one of the hard things about society and those kids, whether the kid's 7, 8, or 18 or 25, it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter. Some of these kids are literally getting in their 20s before anyone says, huh, you might have this.
Right.
They've gone
Absolutely.
through the ringer
Yes.
about everything else
Mm-hmm. Yep.
until finally someone says, oh, well, we, meaning everyone before, has missed
Right.
this one key component.
Mm-hmm.
So when we find it, no matter what their age, when we have that rigidity and they're developing the systems for survival for themselves,
Yeah.
when we work with those parents, it's going to be much more focused on the idea of let's see where their systems are. And
Mm-hmm.
then there are techniques, and that would be a much longer show, but there's techniques that we can do
Podcast.
yes, as trainers, as professionals. There are programs that can do
Yes.
some
Absolutely.
specific work around these things. But the idea is to take that rigidity and to find where's the curiosity for that
Totally.
kid.
Yes.
And that's often with
Love
high
that.
functioning autism, they're some of my favorites because it's literally a puzzle on our side to look and say, okay, I see the pattern. You keep
Right.
repeating the pattern, and everyone
Mm-hmm.
keeps telling you to stop the pattern.
Right.
But the pattern has kept them safe
Oh,
for
absolutely.
years.
Safe,
And
comfortable.
and I don't mean physically safe, but
Yeah.
it could have been.
Right.
It's the whole idea of they are living in something in here
Right.
that they can't get away from. So
Totally.
what we would work with that parent on is let's find the curiosity and try to open that door. And that could be special
Yes.
treatments or programs or certain things that kid may need. And we help
Mm-hmm.
those families get into that process sometimes. So
Great.
here's your consultant. Let's find the
Beautiful.
program with
Okay,
this
good.
thing and that, et cetera. So we will
makes
bring in
a lot of sense.
partners and make recommendations for things like
Awesome.
that. But oftentimes at home, it becomes this process of, okay, mom and dad, here's your sequence.
Mm-hmm.
And we're literally going to create what in the field we would call protocol.
Mm-hmm.
Your kid does this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You've seen it 1,000 times.
Yeah.
We know as professionals, and now we expect you to know as parents, that you can't just go to them and say, stop that.
Of course.
Right? Okay,
Yeah,
let's
that
start
doesn't work.
there. Let's just start there.
Right.
and make this agreement as the
Yeah.
people around the kid that we're just going to stop doing what doesn't work.
Yes.
Now it opens the door to say, okay, let's find this curiosity that would get the kid to, not quickly usually, but let's
Right.
get the kid who's in this
a
pattern
process.
to stop
Yes.
and to look at that pattern or just poke his head out of that pattern and
Mm-hmm.
go, what are y'all doing over there?
Straight.
And
Yep.
you have to lead them to you. Okay.
Yep.
With older kids or young adults with either that or nonverbal learning disorder, et cetera,
Right.
oftentimes that's about resources. Because
Totally.
their brain's still developing, they're still
Mm-hmm.
growing, they're changing, there's all these things. So you can use that to your advantage. When you start to see the curiosity about, for example, money or money management or having freedom, that's a big word right now.
Huge.
Freedom.
Yep.
Right?
Enormous.
Right. You get to go to that kid, that 19-year-old high functioning autism kid and go, okay, you state you want freedom. Well, I as the dad am going to tell you that freedom's over here. And that kid will stay
Mm-hmm.
where they are in their pattern. But
Mm-hmm.
as they understand that the answer's over here, they will actually break from that pattern to come to you and say, tell me the secret of this.
Right.
That's the golden moment. Okay.
Absolutely.
And with those developmental delays and with the nonverbal learning disorders and the spectrum, autism spectrum, et cetera, you have to create those. If you don't, it will, in my experience at least,
Right.
professionally,
Totally.
we've seen these patterns continue for years and years and years. Our oldest client was 38 years old, high functioning autism.
Sure.
Parents came in to work with us around the idea of we're going to die one day, and then what?
Right. Absolutely.
And that was it, is going in, and they had let this perpetually spin, always hoping that something would happen.
Totally.
It was just
praying and hoping. Yeah.
Right, without understanding that this kid needs them to create the moment
Absolutely.
to come out.
Bring the structure to come out. Yeah.
Right, them or someone else.
Yes.
And that's where programs and all those things come in. And some parents don't have the energy left. They've been
How could they? I mean, let's be honest.
Right. Where we come in, we work all the way from the parents who are just getting into it all the way to, we've been in this for years, help us figure out where we're at now.
Got it.
One of the big things for me is parents don't know what they don't know.
Sure.
So we are the people that step in to educate and train those skills and get them to that place of let's have some hope and turn this around.
Totally.
And that's honestly what a lot of parents have said, is that when they've gone through our trainings, at the end of the trainings, the feedback is, I have hope for the first time in 10 years. I have hope because they just didn't know that any of this was possible.
Right.
It's all, to me, they're all professional secrets. Okay.
Yeah.
And we've all been trained in them. And I don't even think they were meant to be secrets. They're just that when I worked in wilderness therapy, my companies that I worked for spent thousands of dollars and thousands of hours training me because they wanted me to be a good staff.
Of course.
And I think we're the ones that are now turning that around and saying, okay, we're done training staff. We're going to train the ones who are going to be there forever. That's the point.
I mean, in essence, and we talked about this before off camera before we set this up, but the idea that you're providing this holistic approach to what this looks like, because realistically, if they're going through treatment and the kids or whoever going through treatment and they're having a great connection with the therapist and they're doing this and they're doing that and they're totally immersed, 2 days later, 4 days, whatever amount of time later, they come back and it's the same shit at the house. Yeah. So you're really you're the people on the ground now who are really making sure that all of this energy, time, and money put into some of these other programs is actually being perpetuated, taught at home, continued. This idea of continuation of care is where you're at. And I think that niche that you have right now is so key to people's success long term. Honestly, I really do. Honestly, and I think a lot of people viewing out there would agree. I've worked with clients at this point where they've gone to treatment 3 or 4 times and trying to figure out. The parents are knocking their heads against the wall and they're like, "What do we do, Elliot?" And I'm like, "Have you looked at yourselves?"
Yes. And that's it. I can't express to you. I'll share that I founded this company after I left wilderness therapy. And part of the reason that I founded it was a certain father who I was having a discussion with, and he was really worried he was going to see his daughter. And it was this whole moment of well, can you de-escalate her when she gets angry? We all knew she was going to be angry.
Right.
Can you, Dad, calm her down? And literally, he rose his hands and said, "Oh, I read the books, but I don't know how to do it."
Right.
Do you hear that word?
Yeah.
I don't know how to do it.
Right.
I hope that everyone who ever thinks that finds us, because that's the whole point of this.
Absolutely.
I was tired of parents reading books,
and
going to seminars and talking about how they felt. And again, I have nothing against therapy. Therapy's awesome. I have personal and professional beliefs about really specific therapy techniques that are really highly effective. There's tremendous research into wilderness therapy, for example, for youth, all this kind of stuff. And therapy is awesome. But if you don't have the skill to implement the change after someone has decided to change, what did you pay for? Honestly. What did
nothing really? What I'm hearing,
right? You went, you went and you talked to someone for 4 years in their office. Great. What are you going to do at home outside of their office? Because you're venting every week, and that's very helpful. It really is.
Absolutely, a place to speak and seek validation, of course.
To get that energy out, because if you didn't get that energy out, chances are your expressions and reactions at home would intensify.
Absolutely.
So again, therapy is amazing. And if you want to change things at home, you better learn how. End of story. And if you're
That's
not invested
all
in
the
that,
roads.
yeah, that's it.
Totally. I get it, and I'm so glad we're having this conversation because it's so valuable, honestly, beyond words to describe how valuable this is. And I think another thing that you're hitting on that I really connect with as well as an individual therapist and person who's been in therapy and worked with clients and parents and kids, whoever, is we're providing a space to almost destigmatize this idea of what this looks like.
Right.
Like, it doesn't need to be this traditional trajectory of like, you do this, and you do that. We're really, I think, within this conversation, having discourse to let people know that there's other options.
Yes.
You being one of them.
Right. And that's the whole key, is that for some people, they need therapy. They go and they talk to someone, right? Other people, they need, the club, and they go and they play racquetball with their friends. Other people get in their car and drive through town screaming at the top of their lungs. People develop ways of handling whatever they're dealing with.
Totally.
Which is where we step in, where when a whole family has come up with their ways, but nothing's getting better.
Mm-hmm.
That's where, you were talking about boundaries before. I'll step back into that and say, if you are witnessing your kid struggle and your reaction is to step into something that doesn't alleviate that struggle, then you're not part of a solution. You're just surviving.
Right.
And the really interesting thing about kids is that if they don't get what they need, they automatically intensify.
Totally.
And that's where we see the extremes start to happen, and then what the parent was doing no longer works for them, because they can't go get in their car and drive through town screaming at the top of their lungs.
Right.
Guess what? Their kid knocked out all the windows of their car with a baseball bat. True story.
Yep. Oh shit, man!
I mean, we've had those kids that they're trying to tell you that this isn't working, that they need something else from you. Or from the system, from their school, from etc.
Yeah.
And it's not just about the parents, by the way.
Right.
It's often about the parents learning how to use the resources that are at their disposal, but use them in a way that actually is going to function for their kid. Totally. And we could tell tons of horror stories of things kids had to do to get their parents' attention along the way. And a lot of those kids would be like, "Oh, I didn't want their attention. I was just doing it for fun." And
right.
In the therapist world, we're all sitting there going, right.
And yes.
So you lit your mattress on fire just for fun in your room. Okay.
Totally.
Another true story.
Wow.
Like, these are the things that it's like, if you do nothing, right, then they're going to get your attention eventually.
Right. The escalation continues.
Right. That or the family will disintegrate. Either, the kid will go to treatment all the way until they're 18 and then check themselves out. And some parents hold really clear boundaries around, like, you're not coming home without doing this work.
Right.
And that we actually really support that, because there's so much evidence to, if the kid is invested in their own life, you will see change.
Totally.
It just rule. There's the rule. But then you get into the parents who, well, come home now and let's figure it out.
Right.
It's like, you've been gone for 4 years.
Right.
You've been gone for 4. Let's find out who you are.
Totally.
And those patterns never shifted. Ever. They might have done family programs and therapy and all this kind of stuff. They know how they feel when their kid punches the wall, because they've answered that question 10,000 times, but they have no idea how to stop him from doing it this time.
Right. The action piece.
Right.
You're like when therapy's not the answer, Robert Trout and company are the action.
Yes.
We're the ones on the ground kicking ass and taking names.
That's
man.
Right.
That's
we're trying to set that up. And I want to be clear that a part of this is educating parents about being able to witness what they're seeing. Because for some families, they do the training, they set the boundaries. Let's say it's a transition, the kid comes home, they set the boundaries, they get everything moving, and it might be months, 6 months, a year, till that kid has their next struggle. And some parents step in and go, "Oh, well, what do we do now?" And it's like, well, you continue to follow the training. understanding that as your kid gets older and becomes a young adult, they are individuating. They have to. And sometimes that looks like them making some really stupid decisions and experiences.
Been
the
there.
question is that when they make that decision,
right,
do they come back and talk to you about it?
mm-hmm.
Or are you not safe? So
Right.
they go off and they continue that escalation of experience
Mm-hmm.
without having you to come back and be that person. But you don't have
Right.
to save them. That's
Yeah.
not the point. The
Yeah.
point is
We're
for them
done
to
with that.
experience the negative, have the world hold its boundaries, which,
Right.
natural consequences, and,
Yeah.
the kid will learn where those are. And that's really important.
Absolutely.
But that doesn't mean you can't be that support that they just keep coming back to and saying, I don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
And you reflecting and having the skill to hold that where your relationship stays intact the entire time until they do stabilize, which, just looking at neuroscience and the idea of a majority of brains manifesting their full prefrontal cortex,
Mm-hmm.
or let's say 25 years old in those areas, is like we're trying to get them to that hump where they're able to make all the connections they need to.
Absolutely.
Now we just need them to be able to break the patterning to reform. And that's where the relationship is so key. So key to that.
I just love that you said we can't fix everything as parents, because I think for a lot of parents I've worked with, that is a very hard thing to hear.
Absolutely.
So thank you for bringing that to the table. No, of course not. Why would they? Why would they? And that's the moment. Robert, this has been an unbelievable conversation. I appreciate you so much taking the time to be on my Facebook Live channel. And before we wrap up today, if you could, give us some resources, ways to find you, other places to visit, just to keep our viewers engaged in what you're doing here. Because I think, honestly, again, thumbs up out there, people, smiley faces, whatever you need to do. I know there's so many of you out there that view this channel that need help with this. So please, if you could give us some resources, I think that'd be extremely helpful.
Absolutely. So our website is the EHI, so THEEHI.org. That's our website to find us and to look through the services we offer and the different ways we help families. Our admissions line to talk to myself or whoever's on call at the time is 970-315-2036. And we'll talk to anyone. There's no charge to call and say, this is what's going on. Like we'll talk to anyone and kind of look at what their budgets are and where they fit into need, where they live, all that kind of stuff. And then, we've had a lot of inquiries and work with group trainings where, if you're out there and you're a group of therapists and you want to figure out, well, how do we start into putting some of these skills into place where we live, or how do we start a parent support group that's not going to just be, parents screaming about their lives, things like that. We're open to a lot of those conversations. And support and helping that get started. But honestly, the biggest thing for anyone listening to this is to let people know that this exists. I founded the company 3.5 years ago, and we're just gaining traction nationally where enough parents and enough families and enough therapists are looking at this and going, oh, right, this is something that has been missing for so long. Because again, you can Google Amazon parent books and get 10,000 hits. Or you can say, okay, let's get someone to come in, and in 2 to 3 days, we can practice and go through and know the body language and the techniques and the words and all this. We'll have a foundation to work from. So, that's the whole thing, is just talk to each other, tell people about this so that we can reach more and more families and get them stabilized.
Amazing. So appreciate it. Again, this has been such, for me even, without having kids, such a great conversation, such a great psycho ed, just to learn and live this is incredible. So, Robert, really appreciate it. Again, we will catch you later. Headed Therapist is out. Thank you all for tuning in.
Thank you.